Well, we officially welcome everyone who's joining us on this webinar today from ICC in London. Joseph O'Connor will be speaking about team coaching, building a business. It'll be a very interesting webinar for you to clarify all your questions and doubts about team coaching and its importance. If you have any questions, please, you can write them down on the chat box or on the questions panel. There's a little question mark where you can write all your comments and questions there as well. We'll be addressing your questions and comments at a certain moment during the webinar, but please do write all your comments and questions there so we can address them there. Without further ado, I'm going to leave you with Joseph O'Connor, who will be giving our webinar today. Hello, Joseph. How are you?
Hi, I'm well, thanks, Alexis. Hi, everybody. Welcome from England. I'm in the UK, just outside London, and it's a kind of rather wet and dark morning. But we have an interesting topic here, and I know that this webinar goes all over the world, so I'm sure that there are many of you in bright sunshine at the moment. So welcome. This is about team coaching. Team coaching is certainly one of the fastest growing aspects of coaching. It's one where there is increasing demand from businesses and very little supply yet. And the ICC International Coaching Community is one organization, one of the few organizations that actually does team coaching trainings for people who want to be able to coach teams, because coaching teams is quite different from coaching individuals, although of course there are similar principles. So let's kind of jump in here, and here's a question for you right at the start. If you're in a business, what's your biggest problem? What is your biggest problem? Now, you just maybe take a moment to think about what that answer would be. Now, whatever you kind of are thinking, probably behind that is people. People who are not working well together create the biggest problems in business, who don't communicate well, who don't deliver, all these sorts of things. It's down to people. However, when you think about the solution, what is the solution to this business's biggest problem? Again, it's people. It's the same. If people work together well, the business thrives and does well. If people don't work together well, then this is the heart of all the problems that go wrong in business. So if we're talking about people working well, this is a number of people, then we are not talking anymore about individual coaching. We are talking about working together, getting people to work together in teams, and that's team coaching. So people have got to work together. This is about teams. Teams are not just groups of people, but they're groups of people who are working well. So how do we get them to work well? How do we get them to synergize? How do we get them so that people who are working together add to each other rather than detract from each other? So that's what this webinar is going to touch on, and that's what the team coaching training is about. It's a big subject. It's an important subject. I'm interested in team coaching. I work as an executive coach mostly, and recently with my wife and partner, Andrea Larges, we've published a book about neuroscience and coaching, which is another field altogether. Now, this is not usually, we can't usually say anything about this in team coaching, but the whole way that we work as people and our nervous system and our brain underlies all of the coaching that we do. It underlies all of the psychology and the group psychology. So in this webinar, I'm going to tell you about team coaching, the ICC approach, a couple of tools, and there'll be space for questions at the end. So let's move on here. Just a little bit about coaching to start with. coaching kind of covers three aspects, and the first is the cognitive aspect. It's about how do we think? What sort of thinking do we have? There's a goal. What do we want to achieve? Business goal, individual goal, team goal. And we think, we reflect. We need to think clearly about this in order to move from where we are now, which we want is either not very good or we can do better, to a better future. So this is part of coaching, the cognitive element of getting people to think and reflect together. Second part is the emotional element, because we may think that we decide things by thinking, but it's been pretty clear now for a number of years from neuroscience that actually how we decide things is down to our emotions. It's not a purely logical or cognitive process. And certainly when you're coaching teams, emotions will come to the front and they will play off each other. So this is a very important aspect of any type of coaching. And this is about values. This is about what do people find important in their life, in their work. And values are very emotional. We will fight for values. We will die for values in the end. So taking care of team values is a really, really important part of team coaching. Taking care of the team goal, taking care of the team values. And one thing that I say is that the team coach is the guardian of the goal, the team goal, and the team values. Because in the heat of discussion, in the heat of conflict, these can be forgotten. And it's really important that somebody is able to keep them, to guard them, to make sure that they are up front. Okay, and then finally we have, of course, strategy. How are we going to do anything? We can talk a lot, we can feel a lot, but in the end, if nothing happens, then it can be wasted. So there needs to be an action, there needs to be a strategy, there needs to be action steps that come out of the team coaching. So that's basically what the team coach is going to be doing. Very similar, of course, similar principles to any individual coach, but much more complicated. Now, I'm hoping that the audio is clear, the visuals here are clear, the slides are clear, that there's no technical problems. So unless I hear anything to the contrary, I'm going to assume that all is good and we'll continue on. So Alexis will let me know if there's any problems with the slides.
Everything so far. There are no comments or questions so far. I think as soon as there are, I'll...
Okay, good. Yeah, so just wanted to check everybody's, I guess everybody's hearing fine. Okay, so then moving on. So what is team coaching? Well, there's plenty of kind of definitions and no definition really captures it completely, but this is about the closest I can get. It's helping a team to improve their performance. Now, the performance, of course, will be what they produce. And in business, this is going to be many different things, can be ideas, can be new products, can be manifesting new strategies, could be any sort of team, management team, decision-making, whatever it might be. How good are they at it? How efficiently do they do it? How effectively do they do it? How good quality is it in their performance? So the performance is like the output. But not only the performance, because the output depends on the processes that a team is using. We make decisions, individual decisions, and our decisions may or may not turn out very well. However, the quality of the decision will depend on the process that we use to make that decision. If we use a good process, we're more likely to make a decision that will work well for us in the future. If we have a poor process, the decision is likely not to work well in the future. So performance and process. And how do we do this? Well, through reflection, which is helping the team to reflect, to look on their performance and their process from a kind of outside point of view, because the coach represents that outside perspective that allows the people in the team to look, as it were, on their own work from another perspective, rather than being completely tied up in their own perspective. Dialogue, of course, talking. This is what happens in teams. People talk, and they talk and they feel and they take action in the end. So reflection, dialogue, and action. This is basically how the team coach is going to help the team in these processes. Now, there's plenty of benefits of team coaching. More effective teams, in other words, teams that do things better, the quality is better of the result. More efficient teams with more economical use of resources, that's usually time or money, because you can have a very effective team, it gets things done, but if it uses a lot of money and a lot of time, then this may not be the best. You can also have very efficient teams who do things very quickly, but the result may not be very good, they may not be very effective. So you need both. And then, of course, apart from that, when you get team coaching into an organization or a business, you start to develop the coaching skills and the coaching culture in the organization. And this can have quite wide-ranging and very good results. So these are the main benefits, I think. Of course, also with a team coach that's able to help the process along, teamwork becomes much more enjoyable. And people who go to work and enjoy what they're doing at work, they're normally happier, more productive anyway. That's the positive aspect. On the other hand, with a team coach, you can reduce the conflicts or deal with them much more quickly, because there's nothing that stops a team from working well than a kind of festering conflict where people aren't really getting on, but nobody can quite say anything because they don't feel right to say anything, but then they don't work together well. They talk about each other behind their back. This is not only is it a very unpleasant experience to be in a team like that, but as a business unit, it's really not effective at all. And of course, a coach doesn't need to be a manager or a team leader. Team leader and coach are actually different roles. And we go into that in the training in much more detail. So you can have a team leader who's a coach, they can overlap the roles, or you can have an external team coach coming in from the outside. And with team coaching, you get much more culture of collaboration. Teams become much more creative. If there's one value in business now that is really important, it's creativity. It's the ability to innovate. With business, with technology moving so fast these days, the ability to stay ahead or even to innovate becomes crucial, because you keep doing the same thing and very quickly these days somebody else is doing something different that's taking over the market. So how do you get a team to be creative? This is a very important aspect that we go into in some detail in the training. Okay, so if we move on a little bit, some people who aren't familiar with team coaching have an idea sometimes that a team is kind of like a big person, you know, a bit like a kind of Frankenstein monster, and that you coach a team rather in the same way that you coach a person. And this is not true. When you coach a team, you are having to deal with much more information. There's more people. It's different sorts of challenges. There's dynamics, there's relationships between the people. There's diversity in the team. There's different values. There's group dynamics. There's different sorts of ways of getting rapport. And teams go through a developmental process as well. All of these things are different and sometimes more complicated than in individual coaching. So a good individual coach is not going to be effective as a team coach if they try to apply their individual coaching skills to a team. Doesn't work. Needs something more. So what is a team? Well, again, lots of definitions. This is the best one I've come across. It's a small number of people. I usually say up to about 10, because once you get past that number, it's rather difficult to have a relationship whereby people feel like in one group. It can vary, but usually around that number, if it gets greater than that, it'll start splitting into smaller units. So if you get 15 people, it's liable to be like, a group of 10 and a group of 5, or a group of 7 and a group of 8. This is not necessarily a bad thing, but you have to be aware of that. And when people talk about teams of 150, well, it's not really a team of 150 insofar as they're not all working together in order to produce something. They will be working on separate things in order to produce the main result at the end. So team coaching, certainly as a team coach, when you're working with a team, it's going to be around about 10 people, can be less, can be a bit. They have complementary skills. They don't all have the same skills. A team which all have the same skills wouldn't be very good at all. And it's just like a football team. You have a football team of 11 people who are brilliant at attacking and scoring goals. Well, they'd probably all be in competition for a start to try and get the ball to score a goal. And in the meantime, they'd lose possession and the other team would be scoring lots and lots of goals in their own open goal. So a good team in sport, and this is the clearest example, it's got to have complement. You've got to have a good goalkeeper, you've got to have good defenders, you've got to have good midfield players, you've got to have good attackers, you've got to have all of those people. If you have a few people who can kind of multitask and good defender and can attack, or good midfield and can defend, this is great. But you need a mixture. They're committed to a common purpose. They have their goal. The main goal that they're going to achieve, there's going to be performance goals, in other words, the steps and stages that the team needs to go through in order to reach the goal at the end. Common approach, this is about values. This is about how does the team want to be with each other? What sort of experience do they want to have? It's sort of emotional experience. And what sort of way are they going to approach this purpose? And they hold themselves mutually accountable. In other words, they help each other to be part of the team, and they hold themselves accountable as well to be part of the team. So each person kind of goes beyond themselves as part of the team. And when that works really well, it's a wonderful experience. And if you've ever been part of a team like that, you'll certainly know that. If you think again for a moment, if you have been part of that, when you were part of something greater than yourself, whatever it was, with a group of people where you're working together really well, really easily, it was a pleasure, and it was really effective. It was like so much fun that you didn't notice how great things you were achieving. You just had a great time, and then you really got things done well. this is what a good team can do. And at the end of it, you not only looked on the experience and thought that was great, I enjoyed that. Secondly, you thought, hey, we did a really great thing there. We achieved something. And that's what a good team does. And that's an amazing experience if you've had that. I know I've certainly had that. And looking back, it's been wonderful. And that's what a good team coach can produce with a team. And that is also the experience that you have in this team coaching training, because we form teams and we give you tasks, we give you purpose, we give you something to do. And in that doing, in that process of doing with coaching, you have that experience. So not only do you learn to be a team coach, but you learn to be a team player, a good team member. A coach needs to be able to be a good team member as well. And you also have a reference experience in the training of how a really good team works together. So it's very rich on all sides. Okay, so let's move on a little bit here and think about, well, what sort of aspects of a team are we going to need to consider in this training? Well, a team is a system, and a system in its simplest form is a group of elements that are working together to achieve something. And a system is a verb, actually, because a system is something that is always in action doing something. And it does something by virtue of the relationships between people, elements in the system. And the team's always doing something. The system is always doing something. May not be what you want it to do, but it's always doing something. So in order to be able to work with teams, you need to be able to appreciate how systems work, how relationships work. This makes it more complex, but not particularly more complicated. You have to take more perspectives, but it's not like a lot of pieces that you have to keep in mind. What you have to keep in mind is very fluid interaction of the team. So thinking in terms of systems, how teams work as a system is an important part of this training. There's different sorts of teams, of course. They all work as systems, but they do different things. You can have leadership teams, boards of directors that need to work together. You can have departmental teams running departments. You can have mid-management. You can have action teams that are going to actually implement what's going to be done. More and more, there's creative teams that will think about the products, think about the strategy, and advise the board. So many different sorts of output in teams, and many different sorts of teams in different elements of the business. But the process by which a team comes together and works together and is able to produce real quality results is going to be the same, and is going to need a team coach. Teams, of course. Virtual teams are important. More and more now, you're having teams spread all over the world. So, just like this webinar, I'm talking with people all over the world. You're connected with people all over the world. That is another challenge, first of all, because you're not in the same room. Therefore, there is some emotional distance from other people. and secondly, diversity, different cultures can lead to interesting misunderstandings and even conflicts. It can lead, of course, to many good friendships and many good working together, but diversity and cultural diversity can lead to misunderstandings, and it's one of the important things in team coaching now, especially with multinational companies where you can have a team with people from many different countries. And it's important that they understand each other and get on well. So we have our virtual teams, different types of teams. So then, here's the team coach. The team coach comes into the team, and what do? Well, they do a lot of things. And here's a metaphor for what they do. This is the closest I could come in a metaphor, because of course to explain everything a team coach does is going to take a long time. But here's a nice little story that you may have come across. It's a Sufi story. It concerns a wise man in the desert, and he's riding his camel into an oasis where he finds that there's groups of people quarreling and arguing and conflict. And so, being a wise man, he gets off his camel and he says, well, what's going on here? And it turns out that there are three sons are arguing about the inheritance of the family. And the inheritance of the family in the desert here consists of 17 camels. That is the wealth of the family. And camels are really, really important in the desert, as you can imagine. Represent a very important wealth. And there's three sons, and according to the distribution of the wealth, the eldest should have half, and the middle son should have 1/3, and the youngest son should have 1/9 of the wealth. But there are 17 camels, so that's a problem. The eldest wants half of that, but that would be 8.5 camels. And of course, half a camel is a dead camel. And camel is a system, right? You cut a system in half, you don't get two systems, you get one dead system. So it doesn't work, and they're quarreling, they don't know what to do. So then the wise man says, okay, well look, I'll tell you what, you have my camel, I'll give you my camel, okay? Now you've got 18 camels. So let's see how that works. So then the eldest gets half of that. So the eldest will get 9. That's great. And the middle son will get 1/3 of the 18 camels. So that's 6 camels. So that's great too, that works. And the youngest son will get 1/9 of the inheritance, which is 2 camels. So that works too. So the eldest son gets 9, middle gets 6, and the youngest gets 2. And that's 17. 9 and 6 and 2. So that leaves 1 over. And that 1 left over, of course, just happens to be the camel that the wise man donated in the first place. And so they give it back to him, and off he rides. And it's a funny little, I don't know quite how that works mathematically, but it does. And I think that's a very nice metaphor for a team coach. They come in, they give something. They don't lose anything, but they give something to the system. And then whatever problems there are resolved, everything works well, and at the end of it, nothing is lost. You've created harmony, you've created a result where there wasn't one before, but nobody has lost anything. And I think that's a nice metaphor. So I'll leave you with that one for team coaches. And basically what a team coach does, of course, is take a diverse group of individuals and get them to have synergy, get them to agree, to share the values, to have a common goal. Help them to achieve that goal in the most efficient and effective way. Coach the team through the conflicts and teams tend to go through a stage of conflict anyway. It's absolutely normal and natural, and it's fine. It's not a bad thing. We don't consider conflict to be a bad thing. In fact, it's inevitable, really. People will disagree. So conflict is not a bad thing, but it does need to be handled carefully sometimes in order to use that energy in the conflict to push the team towards something greater. And that's important because teams that kind of, all very nice and everybody's very polite and yes, and there isn't any heat, there isn't any energy. And that's such a team may do okay. But once you start getting conflict, a little bit of friction, some disagreement, people start getting more passionate, then you get more emotion, you get more of the values, you get more of the energy. And if you can channel that as a team coach, the team will come out of the other side stronger and better. So it's important that a team coach knows how to work with conflict. Okay. So many things important. We've mentioned most of them. The position of the team coach. The team coach is somebody who has a unique position in the team. They are part of the team, but they're also kind of outside the team in a way. So they're able to give the team a different perspective, but they're also part of the team. They help the team to achieve the goal. They help the team to express the values of working together. They help the team to deal with possible obstructions, and they help the team to appreciate all of the resources that the team has. And a lot of this is done at the beginning, and some of it, of course, is done throughout the whole team coaching process. This is one tool that we use. It's called the goal grid. It's a very useful tool for teams to explore the ecology of the goal. In other words, how the different elements of the goal work together. Because when you have a goal, there are many, many different aspects of it. And in this particular way of analyzing, you have, first of all, what do you want and what do you have? And those are things you need to keep. Those are resources, important resources. You have them and you want them and you want to keep them. There are those things that you want and you don't have. That's the bottom left box. Those are the things you want to achieve. Of course, that will be the goal that you're trying to achieve, but also sometimes resources that you want but you don't have in order to achieve that goal. There are things that you do not want and you have, and these are things you need to eliminate. So these are obstructions, and this is where it can be particularly interesting because teams don't look in this particular area. They look to what they want to achieve, they try harder, they push harder in the same direction. And one of the things about systems is that in order to make a system go in the best possible way, it's not really about pushing things harder. It's about removing what stops the system from working. So if you've got a car and you want to go faster, yeah, you've got to push on the accelerator. And you've got to make sure that you're not pushing on the brake at the same time. Yeah. Or the tires are good. You get rid of the old tires if they're not good and you put on some new ones. So it's not just about doing more, it's about getting rid of the things that are holding you back. It's the stones in your luggage. And then finally, we have what you do not want and what you do not have. Those are the things you want to avoid. So these are the risks that you need to look out for. It's not negative. It gives you more confidence if you looked and done a thorough risk assessment of possible pitfalls that you can go into and once you've looked at those, you've got plans in place, you can move forward with so much more confidence and energy than if you don't look at this. So there's nothing negative or bad about looking at the difficulties and risks, as long as you can then make sure that you have plans to deal with them if necessary. So that's one, just very quickly, one tool that we use, and we go into it in some detail in terms of the different sorts of things, and also we do a little systems analysis of how all those elements will work together. Well, stages of development of a team are going to be important, and we go through that, how teams develop stage by stage, and the different types of and sorts of coaching, different coaching approaches that you need for teams that are in different stages of their evolution. So that's a very important aspect of how team coaching is different from individual coaching. Teams go through stages. Individuals don't normally in the short time that you coach them. Of course, individuals go through stages over a period of years, but not in the short term. So that's very important. Creativity, how do you get a team to be creative? How do you balance them between task, what they have to do, and the relationship of how they are with each other? We look at internal and external team coach, because businesses are using their people internally to become team coaches. And this is an important skill people need to learn. And we do this team coaching training internally for organizations as well. And of course, training external team coaches who can come into an organization and be able to coach the teams in the short term. And the result has got to be, in the end, high performance. We want a really high-performing team to be able to work this well. I've said dealing with conflict. Yes, team coaches need to be able to deal with conflict and use that heat to move the team forward instead of getting it stuck or letting it go up in flames. One thing we do in this team coaching certification, which I don't know if they do anywhere else that I've come across, is what we call emotional space. How does our use of space affect our relationships? So that we know, for example, with individuals, that we have our sense of space. So there's what's called the intimate space, which is very close. You don't let people into that space very close to you unless you are close to them. You know, they are friends, family. There's the personal space, a little bit further out. There's the social space, and then beyond that, there's just people. So this tends to vary culturally, of course, but basically, we have a good sense of space, and if people intrude into the space, in the wrong space, then we get quite uncomfortable. If you've ever been at a ATM machine in the street and somebody crowds you a bit too close, you'll know what I mean. So individually, we know this. There's been research on this for many years. However, with teams, you get similar sorts of things. In other words, how people dispose themselves, how they sit together, how they are together, whether some people are further away than others. And we know, of course, that the way that we set ourselves out in space affects our relationship. So just some drawings here of, there's the theatre here with the rows of seats, classroom, U-shape, boardroom table, circle of chairs. And if you've been in a training where you've had like a classroom arrangement, that says something about the relationship between people. Everybody is kind of isolated, and then you have the trainer at the front there. It's quite different experience if you have a circle of chairs and the trainer moves around, for example. So the point here is that the way that we use space affects our emotional relationship and expresses our emotional relationship. And therefore, an important part of team coaching is, first of all, to be able to analyze the relationships between the team members based on their use of space. And secondly, to be able to utilize the space that you have to optimize the relationship between team members, which may be changing the way that they're sitting, bringing people in, moving people around. And of course, where you sit as a coach in a team is going to be really, really important. You will have remarkably less impact on a team depending on where you sit. So one of the things that we deal with in team coaching is exactly that. Where do you position yourself for maximum impact as a team coach? So interesting stuff. And there's the end result, a high-performing team we definitely want. And that's how we want it to end. That's how we want to have things. And in our team coaching, this is what happens. We have a number of high-performing teams at the end of our 6 days. And a very, very interesting learning and enjoyable experience. This is the next team coaching we're going to be having in April in Bali. Wonderful place, beautiful island. So fancy a great experience of learning and a great holiday as well in the sun, with the beach, then join us in Bali. That's what I want to say about team coaching. That's pretty much 45 minutes is what I said. So now I'd like to open for any comments or questions from those of you that have been listening over the last 3/4 of an hour. So over to you guys. If you indicate, then Alexis can make sure you have a microphone so your voice can be heard, or you can type in the questions or comments or whatever you like.
Yes, certainly. If anybody has any comments or questions, now's the time to raise your hand on the application so that I can enable your microphone. You can participate, and you can also write on the chat box if you want. Let's allow a little minute for this.
I'm always happy to have questions and comments. If there aren't any, or if there are very few, then it can either be that it's been such a brilliant webinar that it's disposed of any questions in advance, or it could be that it's been not. Everybody's very confused, so I'm.
There is one question,
but I'm hoping there will be some questions too. Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Are there any benefits of being an internal team coach? And if yes, what are the benefits?
Well, yes, certainly. First of all, just having an internal team coach is going to be good anyway, because there's plenty of businesses that don't have any team coaching whatsoever. So an internal team coach is great. There's all the benefits that you get from having team coaching, first of all. Secondly, with regard to having an internal team coach rather than an external one, well, it's cheaper. For a start, you don't pay anyone to come in. Also, it can be more long-term. You can have more interactions over a longer period of time, so you get to know each other better. The drawbacks can be that it can be a little bit comfortable, and it also can be because the team coach is internal and working in the same organization, that the level of disclosure for people, they can keep things back. They can, keep things back because, especially if the team coach is also a team leader or in a managerial position, then you get the problem of that you can get an individual coaching, which is you very difficult to be open, or you can only be open in certain areas with somebody who works in the same organization, especially somebody who is in a higher managerial position than you are. So plenty of benefits for an internal team coach. More and more organizations are training team coaches internally. Of course, there's been a lot of training for individual coaching internally over the last 5 to 10 years. It's been a very big trend. And now the trend is starting to turn towards training team coaching internally, because it's very clear that individual coaches, however good, cannot do the same good work as team coaches, because it's a different skill set. So that would be my answer to that question. Thank you.
There's another question. When you talk about values, is it the company values or the personal values that you change into company values?
Well, this is where it gets interesting in the system, because you have different systems within systems. So you have, first of all, individual values. Everybody has their own individual values of what's important to them. And they may or may not be aware of those. Then you have the team values, and these are very important. These are the values that need to be agreed in the team in order for them to work together. Typically things like good communication, or empathy, or respect, or something like that. So there needs to be agreed team values of how the team is going to be working together. And there's of course, going to be some overlap with individual values. Then you're going to have organizational values for those organizations that have gone through that process of generating and understanding their own organizational values. So you've got 3 streams, really, and these streams usually will flow together quite well, but sometimes they don't. And this is something where a team coach is definitely needed in order to smooth those. It's like three rivers coming together, small river of the individual, a larger river of the team, and a much bigger river of the organization. And you can get all sorts of swirling and whirlpools and leaks and things like that. But if you do it right, then you get one surging river that is strong and moves forward all together. So yes, interesting question. In the team coaching, we particularly focus on the team values and the interaction between team values and individual values, with, of course, guidance on how to deal with organizational values as well. So thank you for that question.
And there's a final question here. It says, what was the name of your new book that you mentioned in the beginning?
I'm glad you asked. It's called Coaching the Brain, Practical Applications of Neuroscience to Coaching. And it's exactly that. The title describes it exactly what it is. Practical Applications of Neuroscience to Coaching. So how do we, if all the incredible neuroscientific discoveries of how the brain works and how it's overturned psychology over the last 5 to 10 years, how do we apply that in our coaching? And that's what the book's about. It's going to be published by Routledge in about a week's time. And we're going to be doing courses on exactly that, coaching the brain, neuroscience and coaching. So yes, that's another matter. And stay tuned for more news on that.
Well, that's it. That was a final question we had. Yes?
Okay.
Well,
More was that?
then I guess we have reached the end of the webinar, right?
Yeah, I'm fine. I've said what I wanted to say, and I hope everybody has enjoyed and learned something. And I hope that I will see you in Bali at the beginning of April.
I hope so too. Thank you to everyone who attended today. Thank you for being here and for your questions. We hope to be seeing you very soon in Bali. Thank you. Have an excellent day. Joseph, thank you.
Okay, many thanks, Alexis. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Good day to anyone.